Hi everyone, my name's Miranda Lowenson and I am a Lone Star College student, and this is for the class of social problems. Ageism, the social problem that doesn't get better with time. And what we're going to talk about today is ageism, which is a really prevalent social problem in my books. Now you might be asking, what is a social problem? A social problem is defined in our lecture that it is an issue that negatively affects a person's state of being in society. And what that means for ageism is that it negatively affects and impacts how older workers and the older generation is treated unfairly at work. What is a claim? A claim is a persuasive argument that is needed to convince the audience that a particular troubling condition needs to be recognized for a social problem. So, our ageism claim statement would go something like ageism needs to be fixed in our society because it is a human rights violation, hurts workers' mental health, and is legal in America but is still common. And if you didn't know, ageism is illegal because the ADA, way back when, decades and decades ago, put in place laws that help protect people over the age of 40. But it is still prevalent in today's society and has only increasingly got worse, and statistics has shown that it's gotten worse since the early 2000s. What is a ground? Grounds are the foundation of the claim. It holds information of the argument of the social problem even exists. So, what the ageism grounds would look like is ageism is not just for newer workers. And those of us who are under the age of 30 kind of feel that sense of ageism when we're put against people who have more experience, but we still meet the minimum qualifications. For the older generation, it highly affects them because their employers think that they just don't provide anything, that they won't be at the company long enough, so they don't invest their time and money in hiring, training them, and keeping them on board. 50% of older workers say that they experience ageism by their employers, trainers, and other coworkers. So it's not just their bosses that are treating them unfairly, it's also the trainers who believe that you can't teach a old dog new tricks. It's also coworkers who there's this interpersonal relationship of, hey, let's catch a drink, let's hang out, let's spend time together and create that kind of friendship and bond. They aren't getting that. COVID exposed how even the legal backing of the ADA that we talked about a little bit ago, uh, it widely opened the door for the older generation to be seen as weak. Uh, the CDC said that the older generation was more amped to get COVID 19 back in 2020. And so it gave employers an easy way out of being able to fire the older generation very easily because they were seen as weak, that their immune system was weak, that they were going to have a hard time with the 6 foot distance and things of that nature, especially things being moved to online instead of in person. The older generation had quite a bit of difficulty switching to just the online platform and environment. Warrants. What are they? Warrants are the justifications or the reasonings on why something has to be done about the problem. For ageism, the warrants are failure to have that interpersonal relationship, mental health decline from exclusion that affects their home life. So when we think about like ageism hurting the older generation's mental health, it isn't just failing to have those interpersonal relationships at work. They start to see themselves as lesser and that they're not worthy of having those friendships, and their mental health just declines at such a rapid rate, especially when layoffs happen. They're usually the first ones to go, and that financial instability leads to many being exposed to homelessness. It's also a human rights violation. How it's a human rights violation is basically because when ageism happens in the workplace, the older generation is seen as unable to complete all their daily tasks because of their age. They're given less responsibilities and less ability to make decisions for themselves. And so when they're giving ideas and their opinions about a project, most people are going to tune them out and say, oh, that old geezer, and try to make a joke about it. What is an activist? Activists are defined as the people who make the claims about the social problems. These are the people that have their voice be heard about the claim and just shout it out to the world, essentially. Maggie Kuhn is one of the biggest activists for ageism, and her picture is right here. She created the Grey Panthers with a group of her friends after they were all laid off from the same job. Back in the 70s, she was known for a big activist for peace, love, and equality. And she created Grey Panthers who just fight against ageism even now. So, years and decades later, this group is just still fighting against something that should have been ended back in the 1900s. She also a- advocated for human rights movements as well. Something on Grey Panther's website is that they want to fight environmental problems. So it's not just ageism, they kind of have the whole, like, just view of how we can make the world a better place. Now, what is a social movement? A social movement is what motivates activists and the social movement organizations to talk about the social problems. Going back to Grey Panthers, that's photographed here, it wasn't just the older generation arguing for it. It's the younger generation who saw that the environmental problems, the inequality, and things of that nature, it made a whole group come together to fight and just advocate for these people and these issues. What is an expert? Experts are the people who have a status like scientists, lawyers, and or officials. They're people that we look up to and put on a pedestal that they have the knowledge, the experience, and years of just documentation and research to be able to give the nitty gritty of the information that we're missing. Manfred Adele, who has a PhD in human development, writes several articles of the negative impacts of ageism. He had so many articles under his name that give us all kind of the solution of how we can combat ageism. Ramsey Aldwin is the president of the National Council of Aging and is a chair member of the Leadership Council of Aging as well. So she has two prestigious titles and writes several statistical articles about what is going on in today's society and how ageism is being impacted by that. Next, we have opinions and bias. Older workers feel like they are overworked and undervalued, especially in the healthcare world. This should be a big shocker to everyone and make more of an uproar because when you get hurt and you have to go to the emergency room, you don't want to have those negative connotations about the older nurses or older doctors not being able to give you the proper care or feeling like they're not worth their time being there. You want to feel confident in someone being there and having this expertise and years of experience to really take care of whatever specific need that you have. Older workers provide knowledge and expertise that the previous generations thrived on by having the knowledge passed down. Nowadays, the notion is that newer is better. The newer something is, the more advanced it is. Every single new iPhone that comes out is better than the last somehow, even though that it's the same. The same goes for ageism. Older workers have years and decades of this knowledge and expertise that they are happy to pass down to the newer generation and newer workers. But the newer generation, the newer workers have surveys of where they'd rather hear someone who's younger that they can maybe relate to versus someone who they think is ancient or prehistoric and that their ideas are just out of date. Age discrimination starts even in the interview and hiring process and only gets worse because it's not seen as an issue. When HR is hiring people, they don't necessarily look at only like your resume. They look at how a person conducts themselves. And oftentimes trainers really do not want to train the older generation because they think you really can't teach an old dog new tricks, but that's not true. They think that older generations are stuck in their ways and they're unable to take on this new approach to things, which isn't fair. And what a conclusion is it's a recommendation of changes in policies to address the problem. For me, I believe that a great conclusion to this social problem of ageism is to make ageism be retaught and reframed about how we actually see the older generation of workers, because the issue again has just been on the rise with no sight of when it's going to be concluded. So, retraining the actual trainers to not just judge someone by how they look or how old they might be, and even if it's older or younger, just to see, do they have the skill set to do the job at hand? Do they meet the minimum qualifications? Are they there ready to learn and be a part of the company and their policies? And I think it goes further into making sure that during that hiring process and that training people to be respectful of one another. And as simple as this sounds, it's a great way to stop ageism. Treat one another with respect and don't judge a book by its cover. And together we can combat ageism. Thank you.